Today, we are pleased to share in conversation around faithful responses to the pandemic. We have two guests. So our first guest, Caesar Thompson, works for the Latino Resource Institute of Illinois. Caesar is a community health worker and vaccine ambassador and is part of the city's COVID-19 response corps. We also welcome Don Abram, a thinker, writer, and public theologian at the intersection of race, religion, and social change. Don serves as a program manager at good partner of CTS, Interfaith Youth Corps, IFYC, and he is also the founder, president of Pride in the Pews, a grassroots organization that trains and equips the next generation of Black LGBTQ plus leaders of faith. Don and Caesar will be joined in conversation with our very own Reverend Brian Smith, the Director of Community Relations and Strategic Partnerships. I'm excited for what I'm sure will be a thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. And so, Brian, I will turn it to you to kick off and begin our conversation.
Thank you, Chair. Behold how good and pleasant it is when brethren and sisters can gather together in unity. I'm grateful for each of you who have joined us this afternoon for our weekly reflection. This is indeed a very important topic and something that we all face during this pandemic. How do we as people of faith bind together and utilize our talents in order to address this issue? CTS has responded by being a part of both the education and the implementation of responses to COVID-19. In fact, just this Saturday, we hosted our third vaccine clinic. And I believe to date, we have, at CTS, we have vaccinated 120 persons. So I'm very grateful for not only the preaching, but the witness that we have demonstrated. But we can't do that alone. And I'm grateful for Ms. Marie Whitney, who has been the point person at CTS. And she has been very diligent in terms of pulling us together and organizing things at the seminary. And we're also working with partners. And we have the Interfaith Youth Corps, which has been instrumental in helping to fund some of our activities, as well as those of our partner congregations that are also present and will be speaking to us at a later point. And then we have those individuals who operate like soldiers on the ground, helping us to organize and galvanize the community to be a part of the process. And that's where we have our dear brother, Caesar Thompson. And so I'm going to bring both of them to you. First, we're going to engage in a conversation just generally about their work and how they have been impacted to move forward with their respective, I would call them ministries actually, but their community and support work. And then we want to pivot to look at faith leaders and talk to them about how they have taken the opportunities that have been presented to them and how they actually operate and support their communities. But starting off, I'd like to ask each of you to describe your organizations and their specific efforts to deal with the pandemic. I'll start with you, Caesar.
Thank you, Reverend Smith. It's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Boy, I'm like strangely nervous. I don't know why. I talk to all kinds of groups of people, but I don't know, something, little butterflies in my stomach, you know. I don't know, maybe it's because I don't normally, like in my faith community, which largely is kind of removed from where I live, because my other job is actually at the Baha'i House of Worship in Wilmette, and I am a Baha'i. I'm like, I feel like so new to it as opposed to most people there, because I became Baha'i like fairly recently, like maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. So maybe that's a little bit why this is a little unusual for me. But again, very glad to be here. The organization I work for, Latino Resource Institute, is one of 31 community-based organizations that were all put together to help fight COVID in 2020. And so what they do prior to that was they do a lot of outreach in the community in South Chicago, helping undocumented immigrants, helping just anyone who just needs help. They do parenting classes. They do social work, the food bank, they do anything they can do pretty much to help people. That's what they're there for. And you can visit the website to check it out if you want. It's kind of a sparse website. I think it's lrii.org, I think, if you want to learn a little bit more. But did you want me to get into any more, or should we switch to Don?
Specifically, what is your response to COVID? What do you do?
For me, for COVID, so try to make it brief. We started out contact tracing, which is basically just say someone tests positive for COVID-19 or for any other disease, but in my case, it was COVID-19. They would be contacted by a case investigator who would then find out anyone they may have been in contact with that was exposed. And then they would anonymously, we would contact those people. We wouldn't tell them who they were exposed by potentially. We don't even know usually, we just get the names. And we would give them instructions on how to safely quarantine. Quickly, isolation is what you do when you're sick. Quarantine is what you do when you've been exposed. And there's slightly different protocols for that. Then it quickly evolves into vaccine pods, because the vaccines, which had been in progress for approximately maybe about a year at that point, all of a sudden were available. And so we started that at the community colleges. Then it evolved into a big call center. So anyone can call us. And this is a call center that is still open today with pretty much any question that is about COVID. And then we started in a homebound program to vaccinate people who could not get out of their homes. And that was done by the fire department and EMTs initially. Now that program has expanded to anyone in the entire city of Chicago, and in many nearby counties as well now can call us to make an appointment to get vaccinated in their own home. And somewhere in the middle of all that, we also started doing outreach and canvassing, where we would literally go door to door to let people know about our programs, to ask them if they've been vaccinated, if they needed any information or any help with that. And that's about where we are now. It's just, you never know what's going next when it comes to this work, but that's what I've been doing since 2020.
Thank you. And if you could share that contact information in the chat, we have some individuals that are interested in learning more. And we'll make sure that I think that's Nissan. I'll make sure that I provide you with additional information. So moving forward, I can't say enough about the Interfaith Youth Corps. They have been supportive of CTS in a variety of initiatives, especially with respect to COVID. Not only have they supported CTS with a major grant focusing on education around COVID, but we were able to support 7 additional congregational partners, some of whom are present with us now. And IFYC has been gracious in terms of helping those individuals that we have sent their way. And so now we're going to hear a little bit from Don Abram, who is a program manager there. Could you talk a little bit about Interfaith Youth Corps and your mission with respect to COVID?
First and foremost, Reverend Smith, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you, folks who are out doing the critical work, on the ground work to make sure folks have access and accurate information about the vaccine. So as Brian mentioned, I'm a program manager at Interfaith Youth Corps, also known as IFYC. It is a national nonprofit working to make interfaith cooperation the norm in America. The thesis of IFYC is simple. We believe that when folks from different religious traditions work together, we can accomplish common goals and aims. As such, at the start of the pandemic, we launched a Faith in the Vaccine Ambassadors program, wherein we worked with our partners in higher ed, as well as community partners in the city of Chicago, to equip them to be trusted messengers in their communities and to be vaccine ambassadors. Specifically, with the Faith in the Vaccine Ambassadors program for institutions of higher learning, we worked with educators to recruit students who served as leads on projects in local communities, allowing for both peer-based and individual mentorship as they work through best practices and strategies. The educators themselves received $7,500 stipends for their time and effort, but we also worked with student ambassadors who received a $1,500 stipend for their time and efforts, and they carry out programming in their local religious communities and faith-based communities around COVID-19. One of the most relevant programming initiatives, at least in this conversation, is the Chicago Vaccine Ambassadors Program, wherein we trained approximately 47 faith-based and faith-inspired organizations in the city of Chicago to maximize their impact as it relates to COVID-19 outreach. We partnered with Rush University Medical Center, as well as a technology company, to provide predominantly Black and brown on-the-ground organizations with resources they needed to be more effective in their outreach and strategy. We granted those organizations approximately $4,700 to carry out that programming, and we offered an additional $5,000 grant for organizations that were particularly effective in their outreach. In addition to that, we've decided to invest time and money and energy into a robust online resource center at IFYC, where we keep track of interfaith stories related to COVID-19, as well as training sessions and town hall guides and resources for accurate information, where folks from various religious communities can go to find themselves reflected in the story, but also to find accurate and relevant resources for their work.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. And as both of you consider the great work that you're doing, and both of you are people of faith, I want to ask you how your faith informs what you do each and every day.
You know, I try as a Baha'i, a big part of what I consider to be perhaps the most important thing to always think about every day when I think about my faith is to have a humble posture in everything I do, and to approach it from as a service to people, to my fellow people. And just, I feel like that's just it's the most necessary part of my faith, is just to stay rooted in that, and to try to increase my capacity as a person, as a community member, and just and try to stay focused on what's really going on, and how I can reduce harm, and how I can improve things for people, even if it's in the smallest way possible. And I feel like that lens is pretty easy to apply to the work we do, because that's really what it's all about. It's just, can I make things a little easier for somebody today? Can I just enlighten someone just a little bit more than they were before they spoke to me? I get asked all the time, people think that I'm out there just trying to talk people into getting vaccinated, as though that's just my job. But it's really not about that. It's definitely not about trying to scare people or trying to twist people's arms or manipulate people. It's really, you just want to enlighten and educate people, and just be there for them. So if they have a desire or a need, I'll try to fill it. And that's kind of where I come from, as a Baha'i, is the way I look at it.
Don, I know you and I share commonality, as you are a product of the Black church, and you've shared that and how it has been instrumental in shaping you. But how do you think it actually impacts your work today?
For me, the answer is really quite simple. As I think about the work and ministry of Jesus, we know that Jesus always served communities on the margins, communities that were disenfranchised, communities that did not have equitable access to resources. And Jesus was in the business of healing those folks who didn't have access to resources, access to physicians, access to accurate balms that could heal their ailments. And so for me, that thread of healing is throughout the Gospels as I see it. And so during the COVID-19 crisis, I see it as my responsibility, not only professionally, but based and according to my faith, to actually feed those who are hungry, to clothe those who are naked, to give resources to those who do not have it. So my conviction and commitment to the work is rooted in my understanding of the gospel and my faith. It does not simply suggest that I do it, but it commands that I love my neighbor justly and show up in ways that serve them.
We discovered from the Public Religion Research Institute that when it comes to COVID, faith leaders are among the most influential persons who can make an impact on persons who are on the margin, people that are trying to make up their minds about whether or not to be vaccinated. And I know both of you have had different experiences dealing with folks on the ground, and especially you, Caesar, as I have joined you during some of your canvassing. And we received quite an array of responses. In some cases, we were able to personally guide people to get vaccinated. For the first time, I know I had two individuals that had never been vaccinated, and I literally walked them to the nursing center and they got vaccinated. But Caesar, you see a variety of things out there. I'd like you to talk about some of the cases or some of the extremes that you come across as you are trying to convince people, or better yet, educate people about vaccines.
So one of the things it took me maybe a little longer than it should have to come back around to it, because my initial take on COVID-19 was it really hit the whole world in a way that if you have ever had like an MRI or an X-ray, sometimes they use a contrast dye where they'll inject it into someone so that when they look on the scanner, it creates like a negative space and allows them to like see things that are wrong that they couldn't normally see. And I feel like that's how COVID-19 is. It hit the whole world and it showed you where all the cracks were. It showed you where all these faults were and all these serious, deep-rooted issues and inequities were, that for some people they were hidden. For many of us, especially as Black men, these were things we knew. We've known our whole lives that these were big issues and problems, but it's making it so everyone can see that. And now come all the way back around to doing a lot of outreach work. Most recently, I did some at an anti-violence group called Ready Chicago. So I was talking to people who, some of them, had to leave to meet their parole officer right then, or they had just, gotten out of Cook County Jail, and they have problems that the average person maybe doesn't have or doesn't even think about. So for them, COVID is like 6th or 10th on the list for the things they're worried about. Okay, they're worried about, I need to get paid because I got people that need to eat. I need to not get arrested. I need to try to stay safe. I need to not get injured or any kind of violence on the street. And so COVID for them is like, they're not worried about COVID. They're not thinking about getting vaccinated, and so these are problems that we should have been treating all along with resources and opportunities for people. Instead, we treat a lot of these problems with just policing, which is really just heaping more pain on top of pain on, for people who don't have anything already or don't see a future for themselves. And so that's where a lot of my work recently has been in, trying to highlight that, the fact that, in fact, I didn't really bring it up because we have so many things we've done in the core, but that is one of our things we do is a resource coordination. So anyone who calls that number can get put in touch with any city resource, whether it's rental assistance, whether it's, food, utilities, housing, jobs, like all kinds of stuff. And so if we can focus on treating some of these problems at the same time, it's a lot easier to kind of reach people, when they feel like you're coming at them. And then I'm just coming at them and I'm saying, hey, why aren't you getting vaccinated? Don't you want to save your grandma's life? You don't want to hug your grandma and then, worry about getting her sick. It's like, you can't come at people like that when like I said, COVID is not their number one priority. Whereas if you were living in, the loop or something, maybe you got a different set of priorities. COVID was an existential threat that was coming to kill your whole world, out of nowhere. Whereas a lot of other people we deal with, it just doesn't rate. So that's kind of where I've been at, like most recently in this year. I guess this auto hand raise feature had just caught me gesticulating a little too much. But that's kind of a neat little feature for Zoom to have there. So yeah, that's what I've been working on a lot recently, and the things I have come to grips with, over the last couple of years is just recognizing where people are at and trying to meet them where they're at and help them with what they need. And if I can help them educated, but vaccine stuff too, then that's where I specialize in. So I'm obviously equipped, but you got to meet people where they are if you really want to reach them.
Don, what kinds of things are you seeing as you address the issue from a different angle, but you're still dealing with large groups of people?
Yeah, so what's become clear for us is that faith leaders are so critically important because we are at a place in the pandemic wherein it's sort of individual, a smaller subsect of folk who are sort of reluctant or hesitant and who are not getting vaccinated, not because they don't want to, but because of access issues. And so what we want to do and have done is invest in faith leaders because they are so proximate to the community that they are able to actually cultivate solutions that are context specific. And that's a really important part of this because earlier on, we were doing mass vaccination drives and mass pushes for the vaccine, but we got to a point wherein we didn't need mass vaccinations anymore. We didn't need mass drives, and we were coming up against some resistance, and there needed to be targeted, context-specific approaches that met, to your point, Caesar, people where they were. So clergy recognizing concerns around housing security, food security, access to vital resources pertaining to other healthcare concerns and challenges have to be taken into account when you're engaging in outreach. Because if not, your outreach comes off as tone deaf and community members have serious concerns around your motivations. And considering the sort of historic distrust that exists in communities of color, but also just a lack of access to healthcare more broadly, we have to be intentional about our approach, intentional about the language that we use, and ensure that our outreach is not rooted in condemnatory language or language that places blame on any particular community or individual, but engaging in conversation in ways that invite folks in and meet them where they are. And faith leaders are adept at being able to do exactly that. They have that trust because they marry the community, they bury the community. They're there from cradle to the grave. And that trust is a huge currency in the work and role of us combating the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm glad that you mentioned that we have this sense of currency outside of money. There are other ways of exchanging with the community. And at this point, I want to open up the floor to some of our ministry partners that are gathered here with us today. I believe we do have 4 faith institutions represented. I believe we have Good Shepherd, Bray Temple CME, Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church, and Bethel AME, and we have the pastors of all of those congregations that are present here with us today. So I'm going to invite you all to unmute yourselves, and I want to hear from you what has happened since you've hosted vaccine clinics. I'll start with Reverend Reginald Burke, who I personally accompanied as he hosted a vaccine clinic about a month ago. And I noticed exactly what you had stated, Don. I noticed Reverend Burke's warmth. I noticed how people gravitated towards him, and we actually had individuals that came a long way to Bray Temple just to be vaccinated when they had other options. So starting with you, Reverend Burke, what were your observations as you hosted your vaccination clinics?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here. It was a wonderful event. It was very inspirational, and As the pastor of Bray Temple Steamy Church, I was so proud to be able to host such a monumental event. Again, as the other brothers said earlier, we're called to serve. And it was such a tremendous opportunity through the Illinois Department of Public Health for staff members to come out and representatives from Springfield. But we served over 20 people that day. It was a blessing. We had several first shots, second shots, several booster shots. And it was phenomenal. And as Brian mentioned, we had a canvassing team, and one woman came from far west over to east where we are in order to get her shot. And she appreciated the convenience and the accessibility. She had spoke about the difficulty of going through commercial organizations and trying to get scheduled. So we were grateful to be able to offer the convenience that day, and we are scheduled for a second clinic coming up on the 25th. But yes, as Brian mentioned, it was great to connect with the community, to touch and feel and talk, and to offer such tremendous service that is so needed. I echo everything that Don and Caesar said, and said so well. So grateful to be able to serve.
Thank you. And if we could pivot to Reverend Jennifer Tinsley, who hosted 2 clinics from Bethel AME, and you also had the benefit of working with the canvassing team. If you could unmute yourself. Thank you, Reverend. What was your experience? What did people say to you as you were hosting those clinics?
First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I also want to say that Caesar was part of the team that went out and came to our church. And he was a rock star of grassroots canvassing, going out into the community. Have an older congregation, and they all fell in love with him. He became an honorary grandson, I think, of Bethel. But it was, we had about 50 people who came to our event. I know Caesar said he passed out about 500 flyers, helped to connect us to the community. We did have people from the community who came to our event, as well as church members and friends. And it really was a good event. One of the things I noticed about the people who went out and canvassed the community was the way they were able to interact with the community in a way that we hadn't even been able to. There were several businesses that now the door has been opened for us to communicate with because of the outreach efforts. So it was a wonderful event, and we're in the process of planning another event right now. So, and I also wanted to say to Caesar, you talked about how your faith informs you and how humility is a part of that. And it really came out, and it was really clear in terms of our interaction that day at Bethel.
Awesome testimony. Do we still have Reverend Catherine Irwin? Is she still available? I know that she was pressed for time. If she is not available, I'm going to ask Reverend Daryl Person of the Ebenezer Missionary Baptist Church to talk about his experience hosting a vaccine clinic.
Thanks, Brian, for the opportunity. Again, I have spotty internet, so I hope I'll be able to get through and say everything I need to say. Ebenezer had a wonderful experience with this. It opened doors to many persons in our Bronzeville community that we had not had opportunity to meet and greet. We also, I think we had 2 events that we felt like were exceptionally successful. And we are planning on doing more as we get hopefully a little bit down the road from the Omicron surge. Many of the persons felt like the church was the perfect place to for them to go and to be able to get their shots and have the ability to get all that taken care of. We had first and second and booster shots available. And so it was a great experience for us. We also did a little bit of testing after we did the shots. So that was kind of like a natural segue for us to do testing in our community. And so we felt like that we were prayerfully making a difference in our community. So certainly it's very, very important to me as I am this COVID experience directly affected my family in that I lost my father January 13th, 2020, who never had the opportunity to get a vaccination. So other than him being 85, he was in great health, but the virus came and it was his time. So we're going to continue to do what we need to do to make a difference in the community. Hopefully no one else will have to experience a similar loss.
Thank you, Reverend Person. I want to move to Reverend Irwin. I believe, are you representing the Church of the Good Shepherd, Reverend Irwin? Oh, Reverend Knox. Okay, Reverend Knox here. Okay, awesome. Reverend Knox, who is the pastor of the Church of the Good Shepherd. Can you talk a bit about your experience hosting your, I believe this was your first vaccine clinic or your second?
Our second. Yes, you know, that the overall experience was just excellent. Not only for the staff from the state were just, I mean, they were a breath of fresh air for the people that came in. Our first vaccination, we had 10, and our last one, we just did our second one yesterday. And we had over 15 in that, and it included 6 children and 2 first-time individuals that got the vaccination. So we're really excited about that. And it actually fed into some of the work that we've been doing through our strategic planning. We reminded the congregation that the church is there for you. We want to be a conduit that address your specific needs and come in and make sure that all of the critical needs are being addressed. And so this helped us interface more with the community. And it also allowed some of our we have an older congregation, as Reverend Tinsley said. It gave them an opportunity to come out and get the vaccination. So we're just really grateful. And one of the ladies said yesterday, before she left, was one of the elders, she said, "Thank you for letting us come." And that just speaks volumes for me.
Thank you, Reverend Knox, for that testimony. And I think we all have special moments that we've experienced in this process, as I was able to engage people right on the street. And I had powerful experiences with people, one woman in particular, who told me, we were canvassing, and she just said, "I'm afraid." And I said, "Well, you know, what are your concerns?" And she shared them with me. And I said, "Well, would it help if I went with you?" And that was all she needed. She just needed someone to be present with her. I didn't have to give her all of the scientific jargon. I didn't have to try to argue about why it should happen. She was simply concerned about doing something that she was not familiar with and having someone to be present with her. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful forms of witness that we can give as faith leaders. And the research is proving true that when a trusted faith leader communicates with a person, it does something different than a scientist, an epidemiologist, a physician, or someone who appears to be an authority. And that is why we at CTS are encouraging faith leaders to continue to have these kinds of clinics and to become involved. So I want to thank you, Reverend Knox, along with all of the other pastors who contribute in powerful ways to healing our communities. So at this point, yes, I want to open the floor for questions for individuals that are present. Do you have questions for us or the individuals who have spoken? And can we bring back our primary speakers at this time? Any questions? And I will ask Caesar, while those, okay, wait, here's a question. No, not yet. I want to ask the two of you again, and Caesar, I've been with you when we have canvassed, and you were speaking with an individual who was highly intelligent, but clearly had the wrong answers when it came to COVID. I'd like to ask you how you deal with individuals that are absolutely resistant as you're making your outreach, and maybe even they are combative. But what is your strategy in sharing the good aspects of the vaccination process, but dealing with people that may want to challenge you?
Typically, I like to let people express themselves fully. I try never try to argue. Even if somebody is very clearly saying wrong things, make sure I don't interrupt them, make sure they are allowed to feel like they're fully able to express themselves, because the moment they feel like it's a back and forth, then it's just, I feel like you're kind of just losing the plot at that point. It's not going to be productive. Honestly, people who are just extremely like 100% against it, or like you said, even like combative or antagonistic, generally you just have to disengage with someone when they're at that stage. It's not really productive. They need to kind of, that wall needs to kind of crumble a little bit, I feel like, before you can have a productive conversation with them. People who have the wrong information, but they're like very, like, I know exactly who you're talking about when you mean that intelligent. You're talking about that woman. It was an older Black woman.
Yes.
She was psychiatrist.
That's right.
She had practiced alternative medicine for over 40 years. She had so many wild concepts. And I just tried to kind of, like, whenever I could, just kind of make sure that I was providing her with some real, like, some hard factual information that if she did her research, she could find. And just, I was really interested to hear what she had to say, because, she kept telling me about all these, the white blood cells are going to make your lungs explode when you got the vaccine and all this stuff. And I was just like, wow, this is out there. But it was fascinating, because I don't know where she was getting it from, but she was very resistant, but she was good to talk to, at least. And if nothing else, I feel like hopefully she remembers that conversation as much as I do. And so, the next time COVID is really on her mind, and she's thinking about it, she'll think back to what I said, and that's all I can hope is to, like, maybe I shined a little light on that path that's going to lead her to do the right thing for herself down the road. And that's usually what I'm going for. It's just, can I just illuminate your way a little bit? I don't have to, I'm not trying to, I don't have to take you into the chair and sit you down and get you vaccinated. But if I can at least make it a little easier for you to get there, then I feel like I've done as much as I can do. But yeah, when it comes to people who are antagonistic, though, the plan is never to meet force with force in that situation. No, you definitely have to let those people go. They have to find their own way back around to being approachable when it comes to stuff like this.
And so, Don, in our training, you all actually had a full module dedicated to us exercising restraint as we're seeking to try to promote vaccinations. And we were encouraged to learn how to listen and to be present. What are some surprises that you have seen as far as conducting these trainings and supporting so many organizations that are doing this work?
I am happy to share this, and in so many ways, Caesar, you set me up, so thank you. I appreciate it. To your point, Brian, we think that communication is a really important part of best practices and actually getting folks to adopt the vaccine. So as you pointed out, Brian, we hosted a listening training and communication training for faith leaders. And there were 3 really important parts of that training that I want to lift up for you. And it gets to your question, Brian, I promise. The first one is inquiry. That's asking how the individual understands the problem at hand or issue. Right? That's inquiry. You being genuinely curious about how they understand it, which is, Caesar, what you demonstrated. Wow, I have no idea where you're getting this from. So I'm curious to know how you came up with these ideas, where you got them from, who you're listening to, who you're in conversation with, right? That inquiry is really important, but it's also acknowledgement, right? Once you hear and they give you an answer, you acknowledge what you heard, demonstrating that you understand and that you get where they're coming from, right? And the feelings associated with it. And the last part of that, and this is what's really important, is advocacy, right? That's you explaining how you understand it. You explaining what you know to be fact. And when I did these trainings, Brian, I mean, I was in the South suburbs working with a clergy group there. As I walked them through the exercise, everyone said, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how much I engaged in advocacy, explaining how I understand it, and how little I engaged in inquiry, trying to figure out how they understand it, and acknowledgement, and saying, I acknowledge your feelings, I acknowledge your point of view and the perspective that you have. But usually folks jump to that advocacy. Here's what you need to do. I don't understand. Why aren't you? Here's the facts. Why don't you get it? As opposed to taking a step back and saying, let me try to understand a little bit more about why you aren't getting the vaccine. And here's what most folks discover, Brian, in the training, and that is, most of the time, people aren't getting the vaccine because of solvable problems, right? Maybe they haven't heard the information from the right person, right? Or someone whom they see as a trusted messenger. Maybe they are afraid of getting the vaccine because they don't want to be sick and be out of a job because they need to pay their family's bills. Maybe they aren't going because the buses stop at a certain time in the neighborhood, right? And this was earlier on in the pandemic. These are all concerns that you can only tease out if you engage in that inquiry and you engage in that acknowledgement and you do advocacy last.
Awesome. We have a question from Amy Asherman. She says, I wonder what advice might people have as wisdom about reconciliation, release amongst family members with different perspectives that deeply affect each other's lives. Would either one of you like to respond?
I would just say, my sister is not vaccinated. My sister is still not vaccinated. So I had an uncle who for the longest time was not vaccinated. He did eventually get over that hump, but my sister still has not quite gotten there. The one thing that makes it kind of a tenable situation is at least my sister does recognize the danger of COVID, and she does not put herself at risk to catch COVID, as opposed to someone who is not vaccinated and just living their life. She is staying at home. She does all of her work from home. She is not putting herself at risk or others at risk, but there's still work to be done there. We don't have the same mother, and her mother is very like a homeopathic remedy type of person. And so she kind of gets that very naturally. Plus, she kind of just has a natural kind of a fear of needles, which is something that is not respected very much by medical professionals and by general people. They do not respect people's fear of needles. Not only are some people fearful of needles, some people, a needle is more painful to them than it might be to you. So that's another reason why sometimes people don't do it. To Don's point, like I used to wait tables. If I couldn't take off a day of work without losing money. And then even if I could, if the vaccine was going to lay me out for a day, which it frequently does to some people, that'd be more lost money. Also, I didn't have health insurance at the time. people who don't have health insurance, many of them are unemployed. And also that is one of the huge connecting factors to people not being vaccinated. Large amounts of unvaccinated people do not have a job or a regular job, do not have a health insurance, which means they don't have a regular doctor, which means they don't have a real reason to trust a doctor, because every time they go to the doctor, it's a different person. They don't have continuity of care. They don't have that trust. So, you know, when you're talking to your family members about it, you know, Don made all the greatest points. Really, just you just have to hear them out. You really have to see where they're coming from, and if those are solvable problems, find a way to help them solve those problems. If not, then you just have to keep lighting that path, and then hoping that eventually they find their way there, and just, you know, do your best to not let it become resentment, you know, and to not let the judgment that you know, it's a natural reaction 2 years into a pandemic to feel a little bit of animosity and judgment, despite no matter how good of a person we think we are towards people who we think are not doing enough to protect themselves, even people who we love and we want them to protect themselves more than anything else, but also to think about the, you know, the greater good. But, you know, everybody's not as strong as you know, the next person. There's just a lot of factors. We never know exactly what people are going through. So compassion is going to be your number one guide there, I would say.
Don, do you have any final thoughts? And it seems in the chat room, this is something that is touching for all of us. I think all of us probably have that family member that just says, I don't trust it, I'm not going to do it. We had a nephew who actually got COVID and had refused to be vaccinated. But any more thoughts from you, Don, on families? It's one thing to have people that are friends and people that you can distance yourself from. But when you have family members that you want to be in fellowship with, or they want to be around you, but they don't want to be vaccinated, that's got to be something very difficult for any family member to endure.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I'll say that there are members of my own family who remain unvaccinated, even as I'm doing this work. And I think there are two answers to this in the way that I've seen it and with the work that I do. The first is trying to see where there might be common ground. This is where this is what we focus on at IFYC, and saying, as we're dealing with deeply divisive and personal decisions around faith or conviction, how do you find a common ground? A really great example of this is, I was talking with my brother, and he himself is not vaccinated, and he does not plan on getting vaccinated. However, he often visits my grandmother, right? So I realized that he himself is not vaccinated, but perhaps a common goal is keeping our grandmother safe. So if in fact the common goal is to keep our grandmother safe, if you decide to make the personal decision not to get vaccinated, perhaps we can agree on the fact that you should limit your visits, right? If you visit at all. I think that is something that I found to be really effective. The same case can be true if someone does not want the vaccine and they believe that they should not take it. Trying to have conversations with them about them not trying to dissuade others from taking it, even if that is their own personal perspective and point of view. Encourage them not to spread misinformation, or if in fact they do, using I statements, right? And empowering other people to make the decision that's best for them. These are some ways that you can sort of navigate the tension that exists with family. And the second piece that I would name is simply naming boundaries out of love. Right? Like being clear about why you aren't visiting, why you aren't showing up in certain places, and quite literally naming that love is an action. Right? And in the way that you understand it and receive it, this is what love looks like for you and your family. And that's being at home, that's limiting the visitors, but also finding other ways to connect, right? Maybe I can't see you in person. Maybe I can send a card. Maybe I can write a note. Maybe I can drop something off at the house. Maybe we can FaceTime. So finding ways to bridge that gap creatively and innovatively. And thankfully, we have access to resources that can help us to do that. But those are some solutions, right? Some possible solutions that I've seen work and that have come up in some of the trainings.
Don and Caesar, we're running out of time, but I want to thank both of you for your witness. Not only what you do, but how you do it and why you do it. I admire both of you. I appreciate your service, and to all of the pastors that are hosting vaccine clinics and doing the great work of ministry, I thank you as well, and I appreciate you, and I love you all. We are going to come to a close now, and we're going to move into the portion of our program where we have announcements. And I do believe that Don has an announcement about upcoming events with respect to Pride in the Pews. So I'll allow you, Don, to give that announcement, and then we'll turn it over to our convener, Chad.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share. As Brian mentioned at the top of the conversation, I'm also the founder of an organization called Pride in the Pews, and we're interested in bridging the gap between Black churches and the LGBTQ plus community. Often, I think these conversations are shrouded in misunderstandings and a lack of true commitment to relationship building. And to the point that we've all been making, meeting folks where they are and creating space for critical conversation is important. And so we're hoping to do that at an event coming up in February 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. Central. We'll be bringing in academics and practitioners and theologians to talk about practical steps that Black churches can take to show allyship with the LGBTQ plus community. And the one quick note that I will add here is that this conversation is really focused on bridge building, relationship building, and finding spaces where we might be able to collaborate with common goals in mind. That's the hope, that's the goal. I'll be sure to drop the link in the chat for you to be able to join. I invite you to join if you're curious, if you have questions about the LGBTQ plus community, if you have questions about how Black churches or faith leaders can respond to it, regardless of where your congregation or faith community is on the issue. This is a conversation you will likely benefit from. So I'll drop the link in the chat and my email, so you can feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about it.
Thank you, Don. Chad?
Thank you so much, Don. Yes, please do drop that link and in the chat or any other ways that we can find out some more information about this upcoming event. Brian, I want to thank you for facilitating this conversation today. Folks, if you want to get more involved in this work, if you want to find a way to connect with Caesar or Don or any of our other ministry partners, please email Brian Smith. I've gone ahead and put his email there in the chat. He's ready to sort of connect you and to work with you on whatever you have in mind. Again, I want to thank Caesar and Don for joining us today. Thank you to our other ministry partners, Reverend Burke, Tinsley, Person, and Knox, who enriched this very important conversation.